Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call podcast. My name is James Bolden. I'm the publications editor for the International Horn Society, and it is my distinct honor to be the host of the Horn Call podcast. I am returning, you're probably hearing this, about September or so of 2023, so I've been back from the International Horn Symposium in Montreal now for a couple of months. It was a really, really terrific symposium, and I've been to several, not as many as some have been to, almost all of them, if not all of them. But I've been to more than a few. Let's leave it at that. And this one was a really, really good one. They're all good. This one was very special. It was the first one out of the country since COVID, since 2020. Of course, IHS 54 in Kingsville, Texas was the first in-person one since the pandemic. And then Montreal was the first one outside the United States. It was a really, really great experience. You can read all about it in the October issue of the Horn Call, or you can follow the IHS on social media for lots of fun pictures and updates from that symposium. If you haven't gotten the news already, the next IHS symposium, IHS 56, will be in Fort Collins, Colorado, hosted by John McGuire, Colorado State University Horn Studio. And I'm really looking forward to it. I don't have a lot of details yet, but it's going to give us something to look forward to all through this year. For those of you who have started your university or orchestra seasons or terms, I hope that that's all gone well for you. If you're still on break or have begun your break, I hope that that's going well also. And I don't want to take a lot of time on this intro. I've probably taken more than I normally do. I'm pretty quick with the intros these days. I just like to get straight to the interviews because that's what it's all about. And my guest today, Shanyse Strickland, is a really, really terrific horn player, musician, composer, multi-instrumentalist, as her bio says. She talks about in the interview when she auditioned for her undergraduate degree at Youngstown State. She auditioned on flute, horn, and euphonium and got in on all three instruments. So it's really pretty incredible. If you're not familiar with Shanyse's music, be sure to check out her website or follow her on social media. She's got a really, really interesting approach to incorporating the horn, not just into classical music, but into all different kinds of music. And that's what we spend quite a bit of time talking about today. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Shanyse Strickland. Thanks again. Yeah, thanks again for talking with me today, Shanyse. So why don't you give us kind of a little bit of a summary or, a sketch of how you ended up where you are today, what kinds of things you're doing, your journey and path on the horn. I always find that really interesting to hear from guests.
For sure. So, I started playing the French horn when I was 11 years old. I was in middle school. And prior to that, I was actually a flute player. Flute was like one of the few instruments that was offered at my school. I went to a really small school in Akron, Ohio. And so after playing flute, flute's one of those things where it's a hit or miss. Like some people, like when they start playing it, it's like they just take off with it. And other people, it's like, I've been trying for the last 50 years and I can't get a sound. So like flute kind of, after a couple weeks came pretty easy to me. But then I had a band director in middle school that was a bassoon player. And he was like, well, we don't have any horns in the band. So I have one of those essential elements books and I'll just give you that. And it's just like, I'm like, I don't know how to hold this thing. I mean, you know how like intense the technique is with horn. I remember my teacher, Mr. Slocum, saying there's never been a self-taught horn player, that actually got everything right,
Mm-hmm.
And so, by the time I got out of high school, I was still playing horn and I was pretty, the knowledge was there, but I would say I didn't have any technique. So by like the time I got to Youngstown State, I actually got formal lessons. I had like my embouchure was like upside down, like I was like one of those like kids that would just kind of hang the hand outside of the bell, kind of just be chilling. And it's just like, so there was so many things that got fine-tuned, but my time at Youngstown, I was still kind of in my exploring phase, during middle school and high school, I would just like pick up instruments just because they were at my leisure. All the other kids around me didn't really want to do much. So, I took advantage of like kind of like getting to know these instruments, like getting to know the transpositions. And that's kind of actually when I started composing, which, it kind of was like a foreshadowing for the future because I never thought that I would actually like, have composing be another part of my career. I just was kind of doing it for fun then. But
Uh-huh.
fast forward to 2020 when the world shut down, I
Mm-hmm.
got my first opportunity to commission a project for the Lantana Brass Trio at the University of North Texas, which Stacie Mickens is a horn player. So,
Uh-huh.
connection there because she was teaching at Youngstown and then she went to North Texas. But so yeah, like I think that I've always had a love and a curiosity for music in different mediums and different voices. And I
Uh-huh.
never really limited myself to only just one, which, of course, usually, especially in college, they just want you to play one instrument. Funny story though, when I auditioned at Youngstown, I auditioned on flute, horn, and euphonium. And
Okay.
horn was like my worst instrument. It was like the worst one out, because again, it was kind of like jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. So it's like, okay, you can play these instruments, but like how well? And horn, my old band director, Steve Gage, he was like, yeah, you were the worst on horn, to be honest. And so to see where I am now, it's like, but you kept pushing though, you kept working hard. So, but yeah, I've always just wanted to be a really good musician first and then a good instrumentalist second. So that's
Right.
just always been my priority and it's opened a bunch of doors for me. So I'm really thankful to be going on the journey that I'm going on right now.
Well, yeah, that's really cool. And thank you for giving us that kind of thumbnail sketch. I do want to ask a couple follow-up questions. So, what was that like? You mentioned like picking up the horn and like, oh my God, what is this thing? It looks like, a snail made out of metal, but there must have been something about it that kept you going. Like I had no idea if I was even playing the right note for like 6 months, and maybe I should have quit then, but who knows, right? It's like we just keep going. And at some point you're like, I kind of like this. I like the sound it makes or the way it makes me feel or, whatever. What was it that kind of kept you pushing, as you say?
I think that it was like compositionally wise, just the horn lines that would come up in some of the band music and the orchestra music that I got. That was
Mm-hmm.
like one of the main things because like flute, usually, you have the melody and stuff, so I really like that. But some of the just the counter melodies that the horn would have. And again at the time, like I didn't really have much technique. So like my tone and the color of my tone was like definitely not up to par. But when I started to listen to more, just traditional horn players, Barry Tuckwell, Dennis Brain,
Mm-hmm.
Herman Bauman, I was just like, oh my gosh. So like that's what I'm supposed to sound like, and that's what I can sound like. But that, so just I think that I'm just in love with the horn for the color that it produces and just how vocal it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that those colors can change based on different techniques, based on the different contexts that you're in. And that's what I do all the time, honestly. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
playing jazz, when I was teaching at the Kendall Betts Horn Camp, we were talking about when I'm playing jazz, if technically with my embouchure or anything like that, I'm changing anything. And it's not, I think it's a very, very minute change.
Mm.
It's a little less structured, because I mean, but really at the end of the day, it's still all flexibility. It's still your harmonic series
Right.
warm up. It's still that because I want the ability to be able to, bend notes a little bit, like get quarter tones and stuff like that out, but still the same concept that we use in classical playing too. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just the color of the horn and just the different colors that you could produce. I think about music and colors when I'm composing too. So it's just how many different like color palettes I can choose and use when I'm creating music, whether it be on the spot or compositionally wise.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I have attempted jazz type things. I'm not an improviser, but I studied with Doug Hill, and so you couldn't get through that studio without encountering a bit of jazz in some
Yeah.
in some capacity. But I'm in awe of the articulation variety that jazz musicians have. There's just so many ways to approach and leave a note, and just so many inflections that, I mean. classical music can be kind of square. I'm sorry, it can be sometimes, but I think there's a lesson to be learned from all the different shadings of articulation that jazz musicians can put. As you say, it is kind of be can be very vocal sounding.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the other thing. It's like I realize more that I have a love for classical music because that's where everything started, right?
Hmm.
I wasn't the kid, to be honest, I wasn't the kid that listened to the Mahler symphonies and the Beethovens. My mom was at home, like rocking out to Prince, like cleaning the house, like, and me just like getting introduced to rock and roll that way, Led Zeppelin, like
Hmm.
AC/DC, like, and then on the funk side of things, like the Parliament and the Funkadelics,
Hmm.
George Clinton, just like, I mean, like, there's so many musical inspirations that I have, but classical music always came across as the thing that was like very structured. You study it, you learn the history of it. And
Hmm.
so there was a certain like perfectionism and elitism that I really respected and I strive for as much as possible. But
Hmm.
then at the same time, I just definitely didn't feel like it was me. Because I had to throw away all of the Prince stuff. I had to throw away all of the funk stuff. I couldn't make certain inflections on things when I really was feeling the groove of a Mozart concerto just because it was
Hmm.
not allowed and is really frowned upon. And
Yeah.
so, I think it was like in grad school when I was just like, I think that I've learned the rules enough so that I'm gonna start breaking them now,
Hmm.
and not like to the point where I'm like, I feel like I knew everything about classical music, but I was just like, well, what can I do differently to put me in the position where I can do everything that I want to do? So I
Hmm.
can honor the instrument of horn and the colors and the technique and all the things that I've learned up until this point, but also still honoring the other side of my background, my musical background. And so I'm like, well, nobody's really talking about horn being in jazz. And
Hmm.
every time you say it, people are just like, oh, like, or they'll bring up like the Miles Davis thing. Like, that's the only context that they could bring it up in. Like, well,
Hmm.
Miles used to play a little horn and stuff.
Hmm.
But it's just like, so what else is out there? So, I started doing research. I found out about Julius Watkins, and
Hmm.
that was a real game changer for me. Just like I said, my inspirations up until this point with horn were Herman Bauman and Barry
Right.
Tuckwell. And to be honest, like to see a black man playing the horn was like, whoa. And,
Hmm.
he wasn't just playing jazz, he sounded like a French horn player.
Hmm.
I think that was the thing. You talk about colors in jazz, trumpet and trombone, that kind of thing. They have very distinct colors, but a lot of times, if you're not careful, you can like sound like a trombone. People would just think that you sound like a trombone
Oh,
just
uh-huh.
because of how dark the color can be.
Right.
Um, but Julius had a French horn sound. He
Hmm.
sounded like Herman Bout, but he was just swinging super hard. And I was just like, so it was so satisfying for me to like get both of those worlds. Just like, it's weird when you feel like something's always missing. And
Hmm.
so I was like, I don't want to have that feeling. So it was great to know that there are people before me that existed that were doing the same thing. And
Right.
I talked to some of, my mentors who were his students at the time, and they were like, yeah. I'm like, so what jazz stuff did Julius teach you? Like, how did he teach you to be a great jazz horn player? And it's like, well, he didn't. Like, we studied below the etudes,
Hmm.
Maxime Alphonse, and I was like, I was thinking like this guy was like a straight up jazzer, like nothing else. But there was no talk of Charlie Parker, John Coltrane. It was just like, do you know how to play the French horn well?
Hmm. Yep.
And then we'll talk about chord progressions and swinging, but we're gonna focus on just knowing the instrument in its entirety. So just learning about all these now heroes that I have, just like a lot of respect, and it just influenced of, the path that I wanted to take and where I'm at today.
Just having the solid fundamentals and technique. I mean, nobody practices fundamentals and technique more than jazz musicians. They are just like woodshedding all day.
Literally just scales after scales after scales and flexibility,
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, that's impressive. So where did the euphonium come in, if you don't mind me asking?
um Again, I mean, like, I was like just picking up instruments at random at one
Uh-huh.
point, and I went to a really small school in Akron, and
Hmm.
so our band was really limited. like, so there would literally be pieces where, again, my band director would know, okay, here's a big horn line coming up. So I would have like my horn, my flute, and the euphonium. Like I would have one of my friends like carry the euphonium, and I would just put the flute in the bell of the horn, which is really bad. But it was my way of carrying everything. And
Right.
so yeah, I would just be switching back and forth. And I love the color and the tone of the euphonium too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like it was available. Nobody else wanted to play it, so I just looked at it as a challenge. I just like challenging myself. It's like, oh, I can play all these instruments, But as I got
Mm-hmm.
older, I kind of like started to, push that number down to only the two. And honestly, to be right now, I don't play flute as much as I used to, just because,
Mm-hmm.
the horn is very demanding, very
Yes.
jealous instrument. Like you
It sure
cannot
is.
be skimping out on horn. Like it has to be your main thing, the only thing, practicing every day. So yeah, so I have knowledge of those instruments now. I tell people, but I definitely don't play them as much as I used to, just because the horn's my baby now. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm jealous of like my sister's an oboe player, so I can rag on double reed players. Like,
yeah,
they gotta keep their reeds up, and they have to have some amount of strength in their embouchure, but they can go like a long time without having to
yes,
do like maintenance. I mean, horn players,
right.
at least me personally, if I miss more than a couple of days, it's like, oh, I've just dug a hole for myself. I gotta dig myself out of.
Same, same. The vibration in my lips after 2 days will just not be the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you can tell like when I was subbing on Broadway for Bad Cinderella. And I mean, I was hitting the shed hard, like
Mm-hmm.
memorizing the book and everything. And so, after I stopped subbing after the show ended, I kind of like, was a little lax. This is summer, do
Mm-hmm.
but when I went back to the horn, like literally after 3 days, I just was like, whoa, what happened? Because like I was so, everything was so set. It was so yeah, really demanding instrument, man. You can't step away for it from a bit
Mm-hmm.
for any kind of amount of time,
Yeah,
really.
that's so true. So when you went to Youngstown, what was your major when you started there?
I started as a flute major in
Flute major,
performance.
flute performance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, they'd be like, you got to pick one of these. Like, like, and I actually got in on all three. So it was
Uh-huh.
really just a decision of like which one to choose. And I went with flute. But then, interesting enough, my grandmother had passed, like, it's like maybe a month or two after I started undergrad. And
Hmm.
so, some instruments are really connected to certain people. And, I would play for her all the time. So at the time, I was just like, I really can't. Like, I'm not gonna enjoy it. This is gonna be horrible for me. So I went to
Hmm.
Bill Slocum and I was like, hey, I know that I've been a flute major for a couple weeks now, but I really want to come study with you. Is there a way that we can like, get the scholarship situation together? And he was just
Hmm.
like, I was hoping anybody that knows Mr. Slocum, he like got really. He's like, I was hoping that you would come back, Shanice. Just like this a really intense guy. And so I was just like, yeah. I mean, I think I would love to be in your studio. So no, he embraced me with open arms, and yeah, yeah, he's just one of those people that's just like, I don't know, just iconic, and his teaching was so abstract.
Hmm.
But then it was funny when he retired and Stacie came in, it was like, okay, now I have like a teacher that's teaching me like actual technical things. Like Mr. Slocum would say, play to the mountains. Imagine you're on Mount Everest and you're trying to blow the entire and it's like, that works, but only to a certain extent. Like, so Stacie came in, she's like, you should be breathing from your diaphragm, and like, your embouchure should not be like sideways or something crazy. I'm like,
Hmm.
Mr. Slocum like created a great foundation for me, but then Stacie came in and really like refined the things that I needed to actually elevate, and actually gave me the mouthpiece that I'm still playing on today, a
Oh yeah, what is
Lasky
it?
80G.
Oh, Lasky 80. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, because like I struggled a lot with my high range. Low range has always been like a natural thing that came to me, but just, I just couldn't honestly get like above G above the staff.
Hmm.
And, it was like coming up on like my junior to senior year, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So But that mouthpiece was a game changer. Mouthpiece was a game changer. So shout out
That's
to
good to
Stacie and
hear.
Mickens.
Yeah, shout out to Stacie. I hope she listens to this. I'm sure she will. Hey, Stacie. No, that is so true. And it, thinking back on like, different teachers and different people come into your life, and it's like it's all grist for the mill. It's all fuel, and so many teachers have so
Absolutely.
many different ways of approaching the instrument that I'm sure you wouldn't be where you are today if it weren't for both those approaches, right? The more
Exactly.
the maybe holistic like musical picture like you said with Bill Slocum, and then the more sort of like you need some nuts and bolts and meat and potatoes
Yep.
kind of stuff on the horn. I needed the exact same thing. I needed both those things to be
Mm-hmm.
to make any kind of progress. So that's good to hear.
Really though, I mean, like it's like you said, like Slocum, I feel like I need because just like my musical sense is like usually something that comes out the most. And so like he really fueled that of like think of things in this way in a meditative way and that kind of thing. And then Stacie was like, okay, but nuts and bolts. And then I got an artist diploma at Montclair in New Jersey. That's where I am right now.
Okay.
And Kyle Hoyt, he's playing on Broadway right now.
Okay.
And when I studied with him, I was like, okay, so now like I'm a grown up and I really want to do this for a living. So
Uh-huh.
anything that there's an issue with, anything that like I don't want any sugar, like I want you to really tell it how it is because I'm thinking about going into Broadway and like being in New York and freelancing, and so like I want to be ready. And so Kyle with no problem was like, okay, so it's like I'd play an excerpt, miss a note, do it over. Like but
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that. I was mentally and emotionally prepared for that kind of strict,
Mm-hmm.
straightforward teaching, and it helped immensely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have to kind of be in the right place for that. Like you said, you have to be
Yes.
ready, like, okay, bring it on, hit me with it. Tell me whatever I need to hear,
Yeah, everything, every single thing. And I mean, like, Kyle's a nice guy, but it's just like, there are times where I'm like, oh, okay, he's
Mm-hmm.
just like, yeah, that's not working. You got to do that over. And I'm just like, but again, it was in a healthy way, and the
Sure.
delivery of the communication was what it needed to be. So I never felt belittled or anything, because it's hard being a teacher. Like, you want your
Yeah.
students to be better, and some people come like the old school way of teaching, which is like can be really harsh and like
Mm-hmm.
toxic. It was never like that with Kyle. Like he was just like firm and just, you need
Mm-hmm.
that firmness at some point in your career. You can't just be having like, in my opinion, you can't just have like teachers that are always just like, you sound great, you sound great. It's like, because when I go to this audition, like they're not gonna think that I sound great because they
Right.
don't have any reason to except for the playing that I'm presenting. Yeah, so no, all the teachers that I had, just like they were I was at the right place at the right time for all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true so many times. What was that like getting your foot in the door playing on Broadway? Because that's still a great career for a lot of people, for people that want that kind of life and, the busyness and hecticness of that kind of work. How did you go about getting there? You mentioned you studied with, Kyle Hoyt, who was already doing some of that kind of work. So that's kind of a big step in the right direction. But like, what were the specifics of how'd you get your first gig, and how did you, was there anything you did specifically on that first gig to, just make sure you keep getting calls and then, get in the regular rotation?
So, a lot of people say that it's like, 50% of like who you know and then 50 of what you know. I would say it's about like 75% of who you know and
Mm,
then 25% of what you know. Because I mean, to be honest, like my first gig in the city was through another one of my mentors, Vincent Chansey. He's
mm-hmm,
like the prodigy of Julius Watkins. Like, I mean,
mm-hmm,
the craziest jazz hornist I've ever heard in my life. Like
mm-hmm,
just insane, and a jewel of a person too. So he was on a tour in Japan and he was just like, hey, it's so funny. Just like, again, I'm from Ohio, right? So like
mm-hmm,
moving to New Jersey and New York, cost of living, completely different. and just the way that musicians are treated and just the compensation that you get for these gigs are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first gig, again, coming from Ohio, I'm used to like $75 gigs,
Right.
$100 gigs, like really low. And so Vincent Chancey called me. He was like, "Hey, I'm not sure if you're free, it's this gig. It's in Manhattan. It was at the new school. It's like, one rehearsal of the show. It's only going to be about $1,200. So, I'm not sure." And I was just like,
I'm
"Only
there. Yeah.
$1,200?" And it was like, "Yeah, they're a little low with the budget right now." So, and I was like, that's gonna be fine for me. So you could tell them yes. But it was just casually, he just like, "I don't know if you're gonna be able to, I know you're in school, so this might be." I was like, that's like a chunk of my rent.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
so but yeah, no. So me just knowing him, and me like before I moved to New Jersey, I was taking lessons with him. I came up here to, do the apartment scouting and all that other good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and took some lessons with him. And so I think that's like one of the main things is just like, playing for people. I've spoke with Rachel Draymond of Genghis Barbie. I'm a good friend
Mm-hmm.
of hers, and we've talked. She's like, horn players don't play for me anymore. They don't ask to come play for me so that I know that they exist and that I can get them into these circles and,
Hmm.
put them on sub lists and stuff like that. So it's just like, I don't know why, but I think that, I definitely would encourage people, if you're in the city or just anywhere and you
Mm-hmm.
know that there are horn players that are in an orchestra or whatever, that's just like they're in the positions that you want to be in, just offer to play for them. Ask
Right.
them, if they're busy, or, like just like try to make that direct line of communication so that they just know you exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, they can put you on that sub list, or they could talk to some people and pull some strings. Like you just never know. So yeah, it's just like you gotta put yourself out there, because that's, especially in New York, it's gonna be who you know.
Yep.
It's gonna be who you know, and you being able to show up and do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
That's literally from that first gig to the all the gigs that I had. Like I played on the Heisman Trophy ceremony for ESPN a few times.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of, it was a specific thing, and this is why I also encourage horn players to like think outside of the box what they do. Because for that gig, they wanted a French horn player who could improvise but could also read music too,
Okay.
and have the ability to take solos when needed.
Oh, interesting.
So, like I feel like the colleagues that I have, they'll be able to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of horn players that'll be like, "Well, what kind of solos? Is this jazz or is this it?" Like
Right.
they wouldn't be as comfortable. And so literally I got that opportunity because specifically the things that I do,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to meet with the producer, and so it's just like I got to be on TV for the
That's
first
awesome.
time ever. But and it was just like fun. It was a good time. So yeah, just like talking to the people that are already in those spaces. And then if you do have something that's very special, that will get you into doors too. Because again, like, I look at me being an artist as like almost like an R&B or like a pop artist would look at it. So it's just like getting into those realms,
Mm-hmm.
and the industry wants somebody different.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear, and even like as a listener, you don't want to hear somebody doing the same thing over and over. So I was just like, well, I don't know any horn players that are playing R&B or hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
barely any jazz. But even the students I have now, they're really into metal, they're into rock music, they're into
Uh-huh.
country. There's no French horn players that have main gigs with country stars. Why
Right.
not? You
Right.
can, but you just have to put it out there, make it your thing, get really good at it, and then be at the right place at the right time. And then boom.
That's great advice. Yeah. And it's so important. I mean, especially for students coming up. I mean, in some ways, the music business is like the most difficult it's been to get into because of the level of players. There's so many great players and
Yeah.
there's so much competition. But then in other ways, there's more opportunity, like you said, just by thinking outside the box. And there's not one way to be successful as a horn player. There's not one way to put food on the table and pay for rent and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's encouraging and really inspiring to hear that.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, like I'm definitely a realist. And sometimes the reality can be a little negative, but I try to always like kind of turn the story into a positive with my students. But I tell them it's like, if you think you're gonna be the next first horn in the New York Philharmonic by the time you get out of college, some of these people have held those chairs. Like my
Mm-hmm.
teacher, Zach Smith, when I went to Duquesne, I was studying with him. He
Mm-hmm.
got that job when he was 23.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when we had the conversation, when I asked him, like, so how long? He was 67.
Yep.
So it's like, unless that person retires, unless they very unfortunately, God forbid, they pass away,
Mm-hmm.
or, something happens with the orchestra, that's the only way that you're going to get that job.
Right.
And so it's like, dare to dream. Like, of course I want you to like reach for the if that is your dream and your goal and you want to bust your butt to do that, absolutely I will encourage that. And I work on musicality with people and trying to bring new life to things that might get the attention put on them if they are in
Mm-hmm.
audition. So, I bank on that, but I'm just like, you might also want to think about some other options. And
Right.
it's
Right.
only going to make you a better musician.
Mm-hmm.
People tell me that they love, bands like Nirvana or Led Zeppelin. I'm just like, so what can you take? What's a musical element that you could take from that music to apply to your Saint-Saëns and your
Yeah.
Mozart concertos?
Yeah.
But it's just, I think, even just with the instrument, there can be this like huge separation of me playing this hunk of metal
Yep.
opposed to when I'm singing in the shower and it's super musical and, like I'm free and I'm just like, why can't you join those worlds? And it's just like, oh, left brain, right brain. I can't,
Yep.
So it's just like I try to provide vehicles and spaces where we're doing both of those things at the same time. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
given lectures. I did one when I was at the uh this school in Chicago. I can't think of the name of it right now, but Coltrane or not
Mm-hmm.
Coltrane. Coldplay.
Mm-hmm.
The song "Fix You." It's like a big pop song, like probably like in the early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's in the same key as as the Mozart Third Horn Concerto.
Oh,
So I
that's
had them
cool.
play that over that. And, one of the students got really emotional because the lyrics to the song. That's the thing. Classical music is great, even operas are great, but sometimes the lyrics are what's most heart wrenching.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be combining both of these worlds that you didn't expect, you can get like an emotional response out of it. It's like this song means so much to me. It's gotten me into different, places in my life, and now I'm bringing this classical music thing over, which usually stresses me out, but now I don't even feel stressed out about it anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
it can be really rewarding if you just take the time to be a little bit creative of how you're practicing and what your method is, and just get away from the nervousness and again like the perfectionism and all that other stuff and just play the horn. And I found that even some of my older students have found a new love for playing the horn just from doing that.
That's such a good idea. I'm gonna steal that if you don't mind. Not
Do
necessarily
it,
that same piece, but
please.
finding pop song. I mean, and I don't know if you know Lynette Compton at Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
the drop the beat warm up is incorporates
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
it's no, it's such a cool idea. I've got to get on that train.
For sure. It's so rewarding. I'm telling you, it's rewarding.
Yeah, it's really great. And so you've got such a varied career. You're doing so many different cool things. Tell me about how you mentioned getting your first commission to write something for brass trio. How'd that come about? And I can't remember if we were recording or not when we were talking about this. It was during COVID, right? And you got the commission
Mm-hmm.
from Lantana Trio. And then talk a little bit about your composing work and how that, weaves in and out of your musical life and your career.
For sure. So, during the pandemic, everything shut down. I had just honestly moved to Jersey in 2019. So I was still getting my foot in the door, having gigs here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
I was at a point where it's just like, okay, some people are still working, it was just a thing about money and just
Right.
like, keeping the roof over my head and things like that. And so a few people reached out. One of them was like Bernard Scully of the
Mm-hmm.
Canadian Brass.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a master class with him actually for the Kendo Betts horn
Hmm.
camp, which is just so funny. Like whenever I have these kind of interviews and I'm thinking about, where I started to where I am now, it's like the foreshadowing that happened because I never knew that I was going to be one of the faculty members at the horn camp.
Hmm.
But during 2020, Bernard invited me for a master class. Just something in hindsight that I'm thinking about as I'm talking. But yeah, so I was doing master classes because again, people were just looking for opportunities to like stay connected to the horn
Hmm.
because they couldn't go in their pit orchestras or their orchestras or they didn't have any gigs. It was just like they were just stuck to what was in front of them on the screen,
Yep.
on your computer, watching Netflix, something like that. So I took advantage of that and gave a few master classes, talked about what people could do at home and while they didn't have the opportunity to perform outside. And then, so in the midst of that, Stacie had kind of saw what I was doing. Like, I was doing these R&B covers with friends just
Hmm.
all over the country. And she was just like, I want you to write something for our brass trio, like in the style that you like play things.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, Lantana Brass Trios, like they're a big deal, right? Like one of the
Hmm.
best brass schools in the country. And so I was thinking of all these, like, I'm like, this is my first time actually composing something as a commission and just really honestly composing my own original work. In
Hmm.
high school, I was doing like arrangements of like hip hop tunes for our marching band and stuff like that, but I never actually composed an original work. So I'm
Hmm.
like, this has to be, I'm like doing a bunch of score studies and I'm like, oh, this has to be really intricate, it has to be challenging, it has to be, and then a friend of mine was just like, why don't you just play something that you would enjoy though? Didn't she say
Hmm.
that? Wasn't that what she asked for? And so, I kind of like just destroyed everything that I did initially. Just erased all of it, just started over. And then I came up with the piece that I wrote for them and it's called a bop and it stands the acronym for Black Beats of Power.
Okay.
And so, I just thought about it and I was thinking about again like my background and all these influences of black music and just a bunch of other genres that I really loved. And so I put it all together and I started to get these ideas of I want to bring these genres into classical context.
Hmm.
And I've kind of been back and forth with myself with that. I'm kind of like, well, a part of like really learning these genres and appreciating them is listening to them in the context that they were created. So,
Hmm.
listening to the R&B artist, listening to the actual track. So I kind of was just like, oh no, like, am I a sellout for like, writing these genres and making it accessible to classical musicians instead of them doing their homework? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But I realized I kind of like, did away with that negative thought because it's not that I'm being a sellout. It's me introducing them to something new. And the
Hmm.
people that really appreciate it, will ask me, so like, what was your inspiration with this? And I was like, oh, there's this tune by Charlie Parker. And, this is how I came up with the melody. I kind of like flipped some stuff, like, and so when they're invested, they act and they're just like, ah, the piece makes so much more sense now
Hmm.
that I know what the reference is. So yeah, so that's how what I've been doing, like composing wise, just like taking different inspirations. Um, I always joke around like music theory was always something that I loved when I
Hmm.
was in undergrad and just in school. And so I was doing this master class once and somebody asked me about, my process with composition. And I remember having a conversation with them before the master class, and they said that they hated music theory. And I'm just like, well, that thing you hate? Yeah, I use that often. And
Yeah.
they were just like, oh, really? That's a bummer. I don't want to have to. And I'm just like, well, that's the thing. Like, I go for certain feelings, certain colors. And if I want something clashy, I know that I have to have minor seconds together. So it's just like,
Hmm.
I'm not so like Neapolitan six and, deceptive cadence. Like, it's not so much that, but I just use all the resources that I have, you
Hmm.
know? And so yeah, like I mean, I never expected things to go in the direction that they're going with composing. Like after I got that opportunity, A few other opportunities came up, and then it was just like, again, who like me composing for this great brass trio, like the word just kind of got out in the horn world. It's like, oh, this person, like I compose things. So I started composing horn sonatas and brass quintets, woodwind quintets. Right now I'm working on something that is really funky, like orchestration wise. It's horn, oboe, double bass, and cello.
Ooh,
So I've
that
also
sounds
been
cool.
doing like these very interesting, like non-traditional, like ensemble things.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just like people want new music, but they also want it to be relatable. And I'm just like, I'm your person for that. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I just enjoy doing. So, but yeah, all of it was just because of that first initial project that Stacie allowed me to have. So I'm really thankful for that opportunity. And now I've worked with the Seattle Symphony, which was crazy.
Oh yeah.
Those horn players.
Uh,
You ever like just like heard somebody that you were inspired by, but also you're just like, what am I doing? Like
yeah.
maybe I should not play anymore just because what? If I can't be this good, I don't want to do it anymore. Like, but of course, just the inspiration was more so on that, more than the
Mm-hmm.
other feeling. But yeah, amazing being able to just like meet them. I mean, like these are like I'm getting into like meeting some of my heroes now. Like me listening to these recordings, like and all this
Mm-hmm.
other stuff, and now I'm like actually meeting the players. So yeah, composing has taken me to places that I honestly never thought that I would be.
Well, that's awesome. And I can't remember the name of Lantana's album, but it is available and listeners, you can go check out Shanice's piece and all the other cool stuff that's on the album. I'll put the Spotify link or the Amazon link in the show notes. But yeah, and I'm working on your piece that's in Lift. I'm going to put that on a recital this fall. I love it. It's really cool. It grooves.
Awesome. I
So
love that. Thank you. Thank you for playing it. It's yeah, it's definitely something that's like dear to my heart too. Just because Margaret, I can never say her last name right. I'm so
McGillivray.
sorry. Thank you. That I'm gonna let you say it. Um she's just been such a supportive person and she was just like, I want you to write something that young Shanice would want to play,
Hmm.
like just like you're just starting out, that kind of thing. And so just the nostalgia and like, thinking about my journey, all that is in there. So, but I'm happy that you're playing it. Thank you.
It's such a pretty piece. The melodies are so nice. It's got that middle section that grooves, and it's called When I'm Older, so that makes perfect sense. Like,
Right. Yeah,
uh,
because I wanted a little bit of drive and something that's exciting, But then also, it's like, again, why do we love the horn? Because of the colors, because of the
mhm.
melodic, lyrical, factors that it has. So I just wanted to put a little bit of everything in there.
And everybody got to go check out Shanice's YouTube videos. She's got a lot of good stuff out there. It's definitely it'll make you think about the horn in a different way, what it can do and what its possibilities are. So, yeah, thanks so much for speaking with me today. I just want to ask a couple of other things to wrap up here today. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to chat. So you were talking about before we started recording, you've got some really exciting stuff coming up. What's coming up for you?
Yes, so I just accepted an offer to be on the tour that's gonna be for the Spider-Verse, and it's with the Broadway Sinfonietta. So we're gonna be going like around the entire country from August to about late November. So if you're in town or you can look up the like on Ticketmaster or something like that. The tickets will be available on the 19th of this month. So that's gonna
That's
be
really
my
cool.
biggest next thing. I've never been on tour before, so 3 months of just like, rocking out, playing horn, watching Spider-Man. It's like it doesn't get any better than that.
That sounds awesome. So it's a touring orchestra, and then they show the movie or the movies behind the orchestra, like a lot of places do.
Yes.
Okay,
It's like a projector behind us, and then we're just kind of playing the score to that to the movie.
that's really cool. And I
Mhm.
mean, I think that's maybe not that one thing is the future, but that kind of stuff is, I think, going to be really, really
Yeah.
popular. Um,
Absolutely. And I feel like I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity again if I wasn't doing things that are also outside of the box. I mean, like this
Hmm.
is in a sense classical music. It's like your John Williams kind of stuff, but still,
Hmm.
it's just like just being in different realms, knowing different people. So yeah, but I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. What have you seen the book yet? What's it like?
I haven't, but they did like it was kind of like an audition thing. So they sent me two passages, and
Okay.
I know a few of the players that have played in it. When it first started, because they were based in New York, New Jersey kind of areas, and they did like
Hmm.
a couple just shows, and it did so well that they decided to take it on tour, and really high horn parts. The composer really loved just giving us the main lines. So
Those
I,
wailing
I
parts. Yep.
yeah, the it's like
Yep.
just high bees all day, like that kind of stuff. So, but I'm excited. I'm looking forward for the challenge too.
That's cool. So how are you getting in shape for that? Are you doing anything particular to get ready for that show?
So right now I'm playing on a Hoyer of 6802, and I've
Hmm.
actually been thinking about getting another horn.
Hmm.
I've been thinking about looking at a Balu, like getting a new
Okay.
Balu made for myself, just because a friend of mine did, and she was really happy with the results. So thinking about doing that, but outside of just like equipment changes, my harmonic series warm ups. I
Hmm.
mean, like I just realized with horn, flexibility is the name of the game.
Hmm.
So, going from the bottom of the horn, like literal the pedal notes, and going across 4 to 5 octaves all the way up, and just
Hmm.
being able to just do that. Ooh, like I mean, like people in my apartment probably hate me
Uh,
sometimes, but they'll be okay. Um,
That's cool that you can practice there. I know that's not always the case for people living in the city.
It's true. And I mean, but just I feel like I'm probably the noisiest person here, but I'm not, you can only practice horn for so long. So it's not like I'm doing it every day or
Hmm.
like at like obscene times of the night. So I do try to be considerate of my neighbors, but I'm like, listen, you're gonna have to listen to this harmonic series warm up because I got stuff to do, okay?
Well, they're gonna get a preview of the Spider-Verse show. So
See? Exactly. So I'm like, you're welcome.
well, Shanice, thanks again. This has been an awesome conversation and good luck with everything and best of luck.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.